Joined now by Spencer Holbrook of Letterman Row, who wrote one of the shortest-lived coaching hot boards in the history of coaching hot boards on Friday. But you had a pretty good idea what was going to happen, Spencer, but you got to put up a hot board when a big opening comes up on your beat. And Bill O'Brien leaves Ohio State. Chip Kelly almost immediately hired. It feels like the Buckeyes keep falling ass backward into even better things this offseason, Spencer.
Yeah, it kind of does because you needed a safety. Nick Saban retires and Caleb Downs goes in the transfer portal. You take that swing, you get him. You need a quarterback, and you wait it out till after the bowl game, and you end up with Will Howard. You get an offensive coordinator who has the endorsement of both Nick Saban and Bill Belichick, which is almost impossible to find. And you luck into Bill O'Brien. Then all of a sudden he takes a job, and Chip Kelly is available because right away multiple reports said, hey, he is informing UCLA that he's leaving. I wonder where he could be going. Well, he's probably going to go work for the guy that he mentored for a lot of years. So it's just this offseason keeps getting better for Ohio State. And, it hasn't even been one step forward or one step backward. It's just been multiple steps forward at every turn. And I can't really think of a better way for this offseason to go so far.
And even when it should have been a step backward for Ohio State with O'Brien, because, he's what they want. He's, NFL pedigree, former NFL head coach, former college head coach, accomplished play caller at the pro and college levels. Like all of the things you would want. There's actually only one other person who fits that description probably, and it's Chip Kelly.
Yeah, I wrote about that Saturday morning at lettermanrow.com that, Ryan Day found something that may be incredibly unique in Bill O'Brien with the NFL head coaching, college play calling, NFL play calling, all of that experience. And I wrote that Saturday morning, there's only one person that fit the bill even better, and it's the guy who mentored him. And it's just so convenient that Chip Kelly wanted out of UCLA so badly that he was willing to do this and take this move. And Ryan Day's not going to turn that down at all. The run scheme that Chip Kelly has, that's exactly what Ryan Day wants with Quinshon Judkins and Trayvon Henderson. The passing concepts with Brian Hartline married with those run concepts, Ryan Day could not draw that up better. And now you've got an offense, still headed up by Ryan Day, but has the guy that taught him offense on it. Guy who taught him offense, his offensive line coach from a couple years ago when that offense at UCLA really cooked, is still on this staff. And so you're looking at a lot of factors coming together that make Chip Kelly maybe even a more perfect hire than Bill O'Brien. And that's saying a lot considering the pedigree that O'Brien brought to the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Well,
and it feels like Chip would have gotten this the first time around, except he was trying to get NFL OC jobs. And if that hadn't been an option, then this probably happens earlier. But, when it happened, it just felt like it was the perfect situation. Obviously not for UCLA, but we kind of knew. Didn't it feel like when the first Ian Rappaport report came out about Chip interviewing twice for the Raiders job and not getting it, that he was going somewhere, just a matter of where?
Yeah, it was pretty clear that no matter what, Martin Jarman was going to have a head coaching search, right? And so Chip interviews with the Raiders, and that doesn't go maybe it went well, but he didn't get the job. And then he interviews with the Seahawks. And by that time, you're just kind of saying, okay, like, where's this going? And who's UCLA going to hire? Because they're obviously not going to have Chip Kelly on the sideline come next August for training camp. So Ryan Day was more than happy to pick him up and bring him to Columbus. And the offense is the pedigree in that offensive meeting room is pretty stark right now. To add a guy like him to all those young minds that are in there. Ryan Day used to be the most senior member of that staff with Tony Alford. Now that is not the case because you've got, somebody who's coached in national championship games, somebody who's, he led the Philadelphia Eagles to a pretty good season there when he was the head coach there and had his struggles in the NFL, but still knows what he's doing there. So, it couldn't have worked out better, but it is crazy to think about that UCLA lost its head coach to a conference opponent as just an offensive coordinator.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with how Chip feels about where the game is going and has never been a huge fan of recruiting in general. Now the recruiting piece of it, that falls on Ryan Day, ultimately. Chip's got to recruit, but it's not like the buck stops with him anymore.
No, and I don't think Chip's being brought in needing to recruit because Justin Fry is going to recruit the offensive line. Each of the position coaches have their unit running pretty well on the recruiting trail, and the head coach is a quarterback coach who gets praised every time CJ Stroud steps up to the microphone. So like
Right.
Chip doesn't really have to do a lot of recruiting. I think that the best thing that Chip Kelly can do on the recruiting trail is be in the building when recruits show up. Hey,
Yeah.
here's Chip Kelly. He's our offensive coordinator. Remember the neon green Oregon jerseys? Yeah, that was the coach. So like it won't be that hard to sell Chip Kelly on the recruiting trail to have guys come play for him. I really think that he can help them recruiting, but he's not going to be asked to do the dirty work or, well, I can't say dirty work because that means so many different things to your audience, Andy, but
It's not even dirty. There are no rules anymore. Like
Yeah.
that hearing is going on in Tennessee tomorrow. There's no rules anymore.
The heavy lifting.
But this is kind of what they were going to have Bill O'Brien do, right?
Yeah, I would say, Bill O'Brien, you get on the phone with recruits and say, hey, remember when I coached Tom Brady? And remember when I did this with Penn State and actually made a couple quarterbacks who weren't any good look pretty good. That was the recruiting pitch with Bill O'Brien. Now it's with Chip Kelly. It's like, I think that he's going to be able to recruit running backs better than quarterbacks. Ryan Day knows what he's doing recruiting quarterbacks, and Chip Kelly can just get on the phone and talk about the NFL guys that he's coached and the college offenses that he put out there and the rushing attack that he was able to do. And the recruiting aspect, we didn't even really think about it when he first gets hired on Friday, just because, hey, he's going to come call plays and the rest of the offensive staff's going to keep doing their thing. It's not as much a recruiting piece at all. And I think it was smart of Ryan Day to look at his staff, see the lineup of recruiters that he has already and say, okay, we don't really need a recruiter at the offensive coordinator position. We've got the recruiters that we want. Now we need to go find a ball coach who can just call plays and be a ball coach. And Chip Kelly wanted to do that. And that's exactly what he gets to do now.
Well, and it's amazing how perfectly it works out because he is available. He's there. I'm curious, if Chip Kelly's not available, like if he's hell-bent on getting back to the NFL or wants to stay as the head coach at UCLA and Bill O'Brien leaves, what were the chances that Ryan Day ends up calling the plays again at Ohio State this year?
Yeah, it was an option on the hot board just because he said front and center on Wednesday, I did not want to give this up. He loves calling plays. I think that's where he's the most passionate for, other than anything else in college football, is calling plays. But he understands that the job requires so much more of that. He's getting pulled out of offensive meeting rooms to go do other things now. He's getting, phone calls in the middle of offensive meetings. Instead of thinking about 3rd and 4 from the 21-yard line, he's thinking about so many other things. And so he can't call plays anymore. So I think there was a 0% chance he was going to go back to it. But the fact that he said that he didn't want to give it up, I mean, maybe we should have put that at maybe 1%, just because he was going to have to find somebody to do it because he knows he can't. But it made it, if Chip Kelly said no, it would have made it even more of a reluctant Ryan Day when it comes to giving that up, actually.
And I find it so interesting that now one of the reasons Chip Kelly wanted to leave UCLA was UCLA kind of telegraphed that they were probably going to fire him after this season. But the other part of it was he was sick of some of the stuff that you have to do as the CEO, all of the NIL, transfer portal, roster management stuff. And it's interesting that the reason Chip Kelly is coming to Ohio State is because Ryan Day needs more time to do the things Chip Kelly hated doing at UCLA.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. But remember where these two came from. Chip Kelly coached for 4 seasons at Oregon when it was just college football in maybe the purest form that it could have possibly been there from 2009 to 2012. You're thinking about an era that we can't even fathom anymore. Ryan Day was almost born into this. 2019, the transfer portal opens right after his first year, and he's got to kind of hit the ground running with that. And so for Chip, he's seen all of this change over the years. For Ryan Day, he's kind of been brought up with all of the change. And so it is interesting. I love reading about Chip Kelly because he is as much of just a pure football coach as you can get in today's college football, whereas Ryan Day has kind of learned how to be a CEO more and more each year. He's given up more responsibility each year, and this is the biggest step yet. It's almost like a leap of faith for him. But yeah, Chip is definitely much more of that classic ball coach than Ryan Day is, for sure.
Well, and let's talk about how these two came together. I mean, Ryan Day was Chip Kelly's quarterback at New Hampshire. Kelly was the OC, Day was the QB, and then they worked together at New Hampshire. They worked together in the NFL. And it feels like a pretty seamless transition here.
Yeah, and I think the terminology is going to be the exact same. This is a guy who has studied Chip, and obviously they haven't worked together since 2016 in the
49ers.
NFL. Yeah, with the 49ers. Ryan Day came to Ohio State for the 2018 or 2017 and 2018 season, and Chip obviously went on to UCLA. Chip has learned a lot about the game since then. From everything that I've heard and read about Chip the last couple of days, there's a deep dive into the option that helped him kind of form a new age running game for UCLA. And Zach Charbonnet was incredible in that running game. And so maybe there's a little bit for Ryan Day to try to learn from Chip here in the next couple weeks before spring ball gets started. But everything should be pretty seamless, and it should be even easier to back off of the O'Brien stuff and get right to the Kelly stuff, because it should be pretty easy to transition.
Well, it's interesting because I know Will Howard, when he talked to you guys, was very quick to point out, hey, I'm a pretty good thrower too. But we do know Will Howard was a really good runner at K-State. And when you're saying this stuff about the Chip Kelly offense, and you're right, he did, because he wasn't running the same offense he was running at Oregon. He evolved quite a bit over the years. And that offense that he ran with Dorian Thompson-Robinson and Zach Charbonnet, DTR quarterback, and Charbonnet is the main running back. I'm imagining that with Will Howard, and then the 1-2 punch of Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins at tail. That's a pretty formidable offense.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really fun to watch them scheme that up, because if you put on the Oregon offense for Chip Kelly, he might throw up a little bit. The UCLA offense was almost the antithesis of the Oregon stuff he was running, just because it was so much more power and so much more maybe scheme sound than the Oregon stuff, where it looked like the fastest show on turf. UCLA was a punch you in the mouth.
Well, okay. We're gonna have to give you some YouTube clips on the old Oregon stuff, because it's very much between the tackles when it was at its best.
It felt like it was so much more spread than that UCLA stuff.
Yeah.
Like, there was definitely an evolution there with Chip Kelly, where that Oregon team, I always thought they were a little light in the hips. I'll keep it PG.
They were. Yeah.
And that UCLA team was kind of mauling people with Justin Fry as the offensive line coach. And I think that's where you'll see the biggest difference for Ohio State. Is like, Justin Fry is going to get back to that bread and butter of what they were doing at UCLA on the offensive line. That was producing like Sean Ryan, who ends up getting drafted by the Packers, who's a really good player.
One of 2 top 100 recruits. Chip Kelly signed it as the head coach at UCLA.
Well, look what happens when you sign good players. It's almost I think there's a saying.
Ohio State signs about 12 of those a year.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, all of these factors, and we could sit here for an hour and talk about this, but everything just points to a more cohesive offense, even than what O'Brien would have ran. Ryan Day was talking about how he learned a lot from Bill O'Brien these last couple of weeks, and how Bill O'Brien looked at the play sheets and looked at the the way they were doing things and said, okay, let's make this a little more simple. Why do we call this way? And Ryan Day said, well, week 7 of 2018, this happened, and so that we just started calling it that. And Bill O'Brien's like, well, let's call it this, because then it's easier to learn. And so there was a little bit of term change there with Ryan Day and Bill O'Brien the last few weeks. But, I think everything with Chip Kelly coming in makes it a little bit easier, and also a lot more fun, because the storylines are just endless. I think that if we had like a draft of things that you're going to hear on the broadcast, did you know that Ryan Day played for Chip Kelly, and now Kelly, those kind of things are crazy.
Yeah, it is the new Tim Tebow and Riley Cooper are roommates for sure.
Okay,
or Colt McCoy and Jordan Shipley are roommates. Yeah, we're definitely headed to that territory. But I am curious, Spencer, you've gotten to talk to a lot of the new arrivals for the Buckeyes of late, Will Howard, Caleb Downs, Quinshon Judkins. How excited are they to be in this, kind of college football machine?
Yeah, it was interesting, because obviously there was a few questions about like NIL because of what Lane Kiffin tweeted and the storylines that have talked about Ohio State and NIL, and most of them have said, like, we know that we can win a championship here, and this is a championship level team. And I thought that was interesting, just because, with all of the focus on Ohio State for some reason with this NIL stuff, they are just dead set on working. And Ryan Day said it best, you can put a slogan anywhere, but at the end of the day, you're here to work. And they're done with the slogans. They're just working hard. And you can get that sense from the transfers. They're ready to just hit the ground running. They're ready to get to work. They're ready for spring ball for sure. because you get to the middle of the winter and it gets a little tedious trying to go lift every single day. You know that better than anybody, but they're very excited. It is a championship caliber team with a championship caliber coaching staff for sure, especially now with Chip Kelly, and they know the opportunities in front of them. Caleb Downs, Ryan Day it was kind of hilarious. Somebody asked Ryan Day if Caleb Downs was the day one starter, and Ryan Day said, well, he's got to earn it. Nothing's given here, but he's going to be pretty hard to beat. So if you want to try to beat him, step up and try to beat him. But Ohio State fully understands the talent on hand. Ryan Day said pressure is a privilege. These transfers said basically the exact same thing. They know that the expectations are going to be championship or bust. And I think the transfers have really embraced that. Even Will Kasmerick from Ohio University, it just embraced that championship or bust mentality that he's never really had on him before.
Well, the thing I think about with these guys, the reason I am so high on them for next year isn't necessarily the big names they've gotten in the portal. It's that JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, Lathan Ransom, they're all coming back. Sonny Styles now gets to move to a position he probably should be playing or should have been playing all along when Caleb Downs gets there. And it feels very similar to me like the older Michigan players after last offseason deciding to come back for one more ride because they felt like this could potentially be a special group. And as we know, they were right. And it felt like I heard a lot of the same things from the JTTs and the Jack Sawyers.
Yeah, it's interesting. You compare and contrast the way that we've talked about last year's Michigan offseason with this year's Ohio State offseason. The transfers made the headlines for Ohio State this offseason. The returners made the headlines for Michigan last offseason. And I think if they wouldn't have gotten Will Howard, they wouldn't have gotten Caleb Downs, no Quinshon Judkins in this, we would still be talking about a fantastic offseason for Ohio State because of all the guys deciding to come back. And, it reminds me when they went and got the transfers of Michigan going out and getting, I think Josh Wallace is his name from the corner from UMass.
Josiah Stewart, Ladarius Henderson, Drake Nugent, all guys that were transfers who started last year. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And they just plugged the holes where they needed them. Ohio State didn't go into the transfer portal, looking for the biggest superstars in the game like Caleb Downs. He just happened to be there. Obviously, once he went in, they went after it. But they were just going in to look for holes that needed plugged once they got all those returners back. And that's the thing that excites me the most is like, how is the culture going to work with these new transfers coming in? And obviously there's NIL at play there. And it's like, well, they've got a pretty good foundation with, 11 guys who could have went to the NFL and instead decided to come back for another year. And you got to rely on your leadership when you bring in transfers, but they certainly have got a lot of it. And, one of the most
and I mean, I know no Ohio State fan likes to hear Michigan comparisons, but in this case, I think they'll like it. And one of the things we were doing going into last season was counting how many draft picks the Michigan team was going to have come this April. It's going to be very high. It's going to potentially challenge the record that's held by Georgia. I'm looking at the Ohio State depth chart right now for 2024. There are easily double-digit draft picks and another possibly like 15 plus situation.
Yeah, I think the entire starting 11 on defense, and that's not, I don't say that lightly whatsoever, but the entire starting 11 on defense, I think will be draft picks. And, if you told me they were all in the first 5 rounds, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Even a guy like Ty Hamilton, who doesn't get talked about a lot, returned for another year. His younger brother, Devon Hamilton, who's pretty good for the Jags.
Yeah, he's very good.
He's going to be a guy that people look at as, one of the lowest drafted players on that defense this upcoming year. And he's going to be a pretty good NFL player, I think. The offense, obviously the 2 running backs, and Will Howard's going to get drafted, and all of those receivers. The offensive line is the thing that you wonder, like, are they going to be able to challenge for the record that's probably going to be set by Michigan this year, or is going to stand with Georgia? I'm curious, but there's at least 11 guys who I know can play in the NFL because they all decided to come back. And then you just add a few more, sprinkle in a few more in those late rounds here and there, and you're looking at a group that could challenge, like you said, for that record that Michigan made very well set this year.
We're going to find out if they do, and now we're going to find out if Ohio State can replicate that feat, because I do think now they're going to be the favorite to the national title going into this season, unless some weird things happen the rest of the way, which it's been a weird off season.
Yeah, I mean, if they lose the offensive coordinator again after 3 weeks, maybe we'll have a different conversation. But until then, I've got them maybe penciled in as like top two, I don't think I think it's 1, 2, Georgia, Ohio State, however you feel, your personal feelings,
Yeah.
and then a little bit of a gap. And maybe Oregon pushes that gap. Maybe another team that I'm not thinking of right now pushes that gap. But it looks to me like it's a 2-team race for the offseason national championship. And then you got to go do the real thing.
That's exactly right. Doing the real thing's the only one that counts. Don't joke about another offensive coordinator because the way this offseason is going, that very well might happen. Spencer Holbrook, thank you so much.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On 3 Sports YouTube channel.